One thing that your chess buddies and Magnus Carlsen have in common is that they all play the Italian game. It is the most popular, the most standard chess opening. Comes out of the first move pawn to e4, your opponent responds symmetrically, you develop a knight and attack this pawn, black defends it, you go bishop c4, and bishop c5, a symmetric response, marks the beginning of the Italian game, also known as the Giuoco Piano, which seems to be translated as a quiet game or maybe standard game. Anyway, this is indeed the most standard chess opening position, and I'm going to walk you through the following moves and show you the most promising variations which work the best for me as well as for my students. Because quite often people are intimidated by seemingly complex nature of the main line with c3 and d4, and instead they opt for a more kind of modest move pawn to d3, which is fine, but it doesn't really allow you to attack easily and you miss out on a lot of really interesting opportunities. So I'm going to show you how to play the main line, but in a way which is simple and aggressive. So if you're ready, let's go ahead and get started. By going pawn to c3, we're getting ready to play pawn d4 on the next move. And although it does not look like the end of the world for black, in reality it's quite a major threat. So let's assume that black doesn't do anything particularly special about this and just play a move, let's say pawn to d6, just to, strengthen center, open up this diagonal. What's going to happen then? In fact, d6 is already quite a big error because it does nothing to prevent you from going pawn d4 and to execute your main aggressive plan. Now you attack the bishop, you attack the pawn, you grab the center, you seize the space. What can black do? If they take on d4, then basically that is quite nice for you. First off, you trade off their e5 pawn for your c3 pawn after this exchange, which is already nice because you trade their center pawn for your flank pawn. Also, you still attack this bishop on c5 and therefore black needs to move it away and waste tempo. If they do, let's say bishop b4, check to your king, you just cover, and from here your position is already really nice and dominant. You are ready to play bishop g5 and to hit the queen. Maybe you can even jump with your knight forward and to team up against this pawn, kind of similar to the Freiliver attack. Generally speaking, you occupy the center, you have more space, more freedom for development. You can always go d5 and kick this knight away. I mean, this piece is not a problem because you're going to castle away and this bishop on b4 will become useless. So overall, you have all the advantages in the world and this is just a great position for you to play. What if your opponent just tries to hold on to his position and drops the bishop back to b6? It turns out that you have quite huge attacking potential here, because you're putting pressure over here, your bishop targets this pawn, and now your queen also x-rays this d-file, and overall black cannot defend all of their weaknesses. So as you trade on e5, and let's say they recapture however they like, it doesn't really matter, and in this case, here comes a little boom, bishop takes f7. Now we attack the king, and at the very least we grab the pawn, opened up his king and destroyed his position, and if black grabs the bishop, that actually blunders this queen on d8, and now you just win the game completely. This goes to show how dangerous this opening can be for black. Your opponent literally plays one careless move, pats his dog, looks back at the board, and he's done, just completely obliterated. Therefore, black needs to be extremely careful, and basically the only move that keeps black in the game is the move knight f6. So anything else, d6, h6, any kind of irrelevant normal move, if they play something like this, then d4, you grab the center, you start the attack, you press them, and you sweep them away. So knight f6, again, the only move that keeps black in the game. This counters your center, and therefore black also tries to do something against you. Now you still go pawn d4, you attack the bishop, and after black recaptures, the main line of the Italian game is pawn takes d4, which leads to like really complicated theory. I mean, after that, black goes bishop b4, they check your king, they attack this pawn, but like there's a really long theory after that. Now, instead of this, after black took your pawn, I recommend that you play another move, not pawn takes d4, because that's what your opponents are ready for. They have studied this line, they know something, right? So instead, you can confuse them by going pawn to e5. So that's an in-between move. You want to chase away this knight and you want to grab this pawn back on the next move. And again, this is super tricky. Just think about this position for a second from the black perspective. Like, which move would you pick here as black? As you think about it for a few seconds, you realize how dangerous and bad this position can easily become for black, because there is only one move that keeps black in the game, and this move is very counterintuitive. Because normally when the knight is attacked, black starts considering, different options. Okay, should I go here? Should I go here? Like, where should the knight go, right? That's what they think about. However, in reality, the only move that is fine for black is pawn d5, the counter blow. Quite a complex move to play, and lots of your opponents, in fact, most of your opponents, won't be able to find it. Now, we'll talk about this move, in a moment, pawn to d5. Let's for now discover other options, which are going to be used by most of your opponents. They're going to notice that this knight is attacked, and they'll wish to move it away. Where can it go? If it goes to g4, which looks like a decent option, going forward, countering this pawn on e5, but in fact it's completely bad and useless. You're going to now get back this pawn on d4 and attack the bishop. The bishop has to go. Let's say bishop b4, check to your king, you cover it, and it turns out that this knight on g4 is completely useless. It no longer attacks this pawn on e5 because the pawn is solidified by your other pawn. So it's just completely misplaced. You can play h3 and kick it off. For example, if they castle, you can't play h3 right away. This knight is attacked. The only move for the knight to go to would be h6, a pretty bad square for the knight to go to. You could take it away immediately and ruin his pawn structure. Even stronger is to toss in this in-between move bishop g5. This just forces him to drop one of his pieces back or to relocate a queen to ugly square e8. Now if you trade off here on h6 and you just castle, it turns out the black's position is completely awkward and ruined. Like the king is opened, and also after whatever black does, you're gonna go knight d5 with really deadly threats. Knight f6, royal fork, knight takes c7, the b4 bishop is hanging, the king is exposed overall, and black is just destroyed. Alright, let's explore other options. You've just played pawn to d4, black captures, and instead of recapturing immediately, you play this in between move pawn e5, attacking this knight on f6. Now, we already know that knight g4 doesn't do much. Bringing the knight back to g8 is just passive, it blocks the potential castling, doesn't do much. After that, you're going to simply pick up this pawn back on d4, and you're completely dominant. Knight to e4 may seem like a decent move at first, but the knight is really shaky here. As you can see, if you attack it, it doesn't really have any way out, right? Your knight and bishop are controlling this square, your opponent is controlling these two squares, and therefore the knight is rather kind of a liability for black here. It's not very clear how black can defend it at all. So that's also a bad option for black. Finally, black may realize that they actually can play queen to e7, which looks like a smart move for black to play. They're pinning this pawn down to the king, therefore you can't take it, plus they're attacking it twice with their knight and queen. Looks like, maybe they're counter-attacking you. But in reality, you can just ignore this completely and simply castle. Now you unpin this pawn, therefore pawn takes f6 is a major error, a major threat, and it shows black that their last move basically was an error. Because if they now take on e5, executing their threat, you then just play rook e1, and it turns out that because of their heavy pieces along this file, opening the e-file was really bad for black. Now you attack this knight, and you x-ray queen, the king, pawn takes d4 is still coming to attack everything else, and if knight takes over here, you just need to be careful and not to recapture by the queen automatically. That would just blunder this rook on e1 in one move, so don't do this. But if you simply recapture by the pawn, now you're completely winning. Thanks to this pin, you win the queen, and you continue your attack. You're winning. Alright, so once again, as we reach this standard position, you play pawn c3, getting ready to play d4, and you do play this move regardless of your opponent's choice. Let's say black plays correctly, goes knight f6, you then hit them with d4, attacking all around. And after black recaptures, you avoid recapturing immediately, but you first play this in-between move pawn to e5. It's going to confuse the hell out of your opponents. They're going to run around the room, trying to move their knight somewhere, or maybe resign immediately, and that's what's going to happen most often. But once in a while, you'll come across a more prepared opponent who's going to come down and play d5, which is the only move which keeps black in the game and the only correct choice of black. We're going to talk about this in a moment, but let me also address the other question that you guys often mention in comments, that, like, it's really difficult to remember all this stuff, right? And you are probably not going to remember, you're going to forget this after a couple of minutes right after watching this video. Now, I do understand this, and I never encourage you to actually memorize variations. We're not computers, right? We're not supposed to just utilize our memory. What I recommend instead is just to understand the logic behind these moves so that they kind of become natural for you to play, and then it's much easier to remember them and you can find them on your own even if you actually forget them. Moreover, I'm actually a big proponent of general strategic principles, guiding principles of chess which allow you to find proper moves easily and that make it natural for you to play those moves, even in blitz. And if you're interested in that, let me also remind you that for a few more days, you can actually take advantage of our biggest holiday sale ever, which is up to 80% discount on my premium courses. And on top of that, it is buy one, get one course free. So if you're interested in me helping you to achieve your chess goals, you can click the link in the description below the video, and I'll be happy to help you. Okay, your opponent have played pawn to d5. What do you do then? Well, you move your bishop to a more active square b5, where you pin the knight. Now they have to do something about this threat. So move the knight away, and now you recapture on d4. And here comes good news. The vast majority of your opponents are going to go bishop b4 check to the king because that's the most natural move to play. It is also kind of an inaccuracy because in fact you're going to castle soon anyway, and their bishop from b4 will not do much right after a castle. Pros really here play bishop to b6, which is strategically a better move to play. From there, they keep attacking your pawn on d4, so if they go bishop b6, they keep putting pressure against this pawn. That's nothing special, but still it's a little bit better for black. But you are going to face this only on the level 2100 and above, so players below that will typically go bishop b4, checking your king, which is nice for you. Now you play bishop d2 to cover your king. After they trade, however they like it, doesn't really matter. We reach to this quite nice position where you have space advantage. Now let's say both sides castle. What do they do now? Well, pretty much everybody will go bishop g4. They like this being so much. What do you do now? Well, first of all, congratulations, you've successfully reached a nice middle game position. Secondly, what you do now is you trade on c6, because your bishop from b5 had nothing else to do anyway, plus you now double these pawns, and it's an easy target for you to attack. You can attack it with a rook from c1, you can do this with a queen from c2, for instance, and target them this way, but the move which I like the most is the move queen a4, because it's actually a trickier option and it's more aggressive. From a4, you double attack the bishop and the pawn, which already is going to puzzle your opponents, and it's really, really hard for black to figure out the right way. In most cases, they're going to either take on d2, which is nice, because then you recapture, and now you still attack this pawn on c6. Plus, your knight from d2 can be relocated to this really juicy outpost square on c5. And as you land it there, basically that is a strategically winning position. Again, the c6 pawn is weak, you can also attack it with a rook, and it's quite tough for black, and they don't have any counterplay anyway. So an exchange on d2 is just good for you. Quite a few of your opponents will figure out that since you attack these both weaknesses, the way to defend them both is to go c5. And they feel really smart when they find this move, because after a trade, they traded off one of their double pawns, they remove their bishop from danger, they feel really smart, but now you can see what they've missed. They've missed your sniper on a4, and from there, you're just gonna pick up this bishop, and all of a sudden, black is lost. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. If you want to take advantage of our biggest holiday sale, I'll drop a link in the description below and somewhere on the screen. Have a great holiday season and take care.